My name is Jessie Gunn. I'm the VP of Marketing and Events here at the Packer and the Produce Market Guide. And as the thought leader in the fresh produce space and the leading trade media conglomerate in the produce space, we are happy to present this Thanksgiving webinar and to bring to you Mike Mowdy, our partner in content and analytics and the managing partner of Execulytics and the author of the Produce Almanac. Please feel free, you guys, throughout the webinar to go ahead and use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in any questions that you have. Mike will be available to answer those. At the end, we're going to go ahead and get all the way through the material, and then he will answer questions as they come in. Thank you guys so much. And Mike, take it away.
Howdy, I am the managing partner for Execulytics, which is a consulting company for the produce industry. And today we're going to talk about Thanksgiving and more specifically, how important Thanksgiving is for produce. And we're going to start off by setting up this little infographic. And we're going to see this infographic throughout the webinar, and it'll inform us about the importance, first of all, of Thanksgiving, and then of the different products within Thanksgiving. And the first thing we're going to look at is the amount of produce shipments in Thanksgiving relative to the rest of the year. And we're going to do that with our thermometer on the left-hand side of the screen. And the higher the mercury goes on this thermometer will tell us how important Thanksgiving is. You'll see the thermometer stopped at 2%. So when you think about it, 1 out of 52 weeks is approximately 2%. And the amount of produce shipments on Thanksgiving is also 2%. That makes it sound a little bit average. So we'll get into that a little bit in a second. But let's make it a little bit more concrete. And let's talk about the actual amount of truckloads for this event. So we have 29,458 truckloads of produce driving around the country attempting to satisfy the demand for this time period. That's a lot of truckloads. And we're also going to take a look at the specific week, week 45, which is the Thanksgiving bye week from 2018, to look at where costs and retail prices were heading. So we're going to take a look at that with our inflation-deflation ticker. We'll see that in week 45, 2018, FOB costs were deflated by about 1.7%. While the retail price for the Thanksgiving week was actually up about 2.4%. So we see prices up while costs are a little bit down. So that says to us that collectively, retailers are making a little bit more profitability in 2018 versus 2017. So now we suggested that the 2% produce shipments was a little bit average for Thanksgiving. Let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail. What we have here is a graph showing the total number of produce truckloads per week for every week of the year. So we're going to draw a little line graph, and we're going to stop right here. This is the week we're talking about, week 45. So we'll just finish the graph. And you'll see that there are quite a number of weeks that are higher on this graph than the week we're talking about. In fact, we can chunk out the weeks that are bigger than week 45, and we'll see that they pretty much land throughout the spring and summer. These are the big shipping weeks for a lot of the big fruit items to satisfy the summertime demand. Obviously, these are very important weeks for produce, but if we were to eliminate these weeks and flip this chart around so we see just the weeks outside of that time period as one consecutive chunk, we actually see that week 45, or the Thanksgiving bye week, ends up being the largest shipping week of this time period. But the other thing that's important, because of the way Thanksgiving falls, we actually have the next week, week 46, also being important for Thanksgiving. So if you combine week 45 and week 46, we can see that Thanksgiving is actually a very important time period for shipping produce. For the purposes of this webinar, we're just going to be comparing timeframes for week 45. So here are the items that we'll be talking about throughout this webinar. Most of these will be quite familiar to you as being big Thanksgiving items, talking about Brussels sprouts, cranberries, pears, of course, pomegranates, sweet potatoes, and celery. Each one of these have a special importance for Thanksgiving. And we're going to start out with Brussels sprouts. Now, if you ask me, if there was an award for the most improved vegetable in the produce department, I would award that to Brussels sprouts. I'm sure there are many of you out there who are like me, who hated Brussels sprouts when they were kids. And today, I would classify Brussels sprouts as almost my favorite vegetable. So for that reason, I would consider it the produce department's most improved vegetable. But how important is it to Thanksgiving? So if we take a look at how high the mercury goes on our thermometer, you would see that it goes all the way up to 5.4%. So 5.4% of all Brussels sprouts are shipped during the Thanksgiving bye week. That's a pretty impressive number considering Brussels sprouts are available 52 weeks out of the year. Now we have 97 truckloads of Brussels sprouts driving around the country satisfying that demand. Of course, Brussels sprouts being a bit of a specialty item, that's a little bit of a smaller number, but still that's a lot of Brussels sprouts. And now let's take a look at our inflation-deflation ticker, and something interesting that comes out of it. We see a significant decline in the FOB cost, and then a smaller yet still large decline in the retail price. What this tells me is two things. First of all, something significant happened to allow the costing to decline that much for this week. Maybe there was a crop failure, or perhaps there was a field that didn't come on in time. And the other interesting thing is that the retail price, although down quite significantly, is down a lot less than the FOB cost. That tells me that, like the Thanksgiving program as a whole, retailers in general were putting a little bit more profitability in the bank on Brussels sprouts than they were in 2017. This makes sense as the cost dropped so substantially that allowed retailers to provide a bit of a cost break while still being a little bit more profitable. So pretty good strategy on their part. But if we were to take a look at the costing over the last 10 years, we'll do this on this line chart, and what we're going to show is the average cost by week over the last 10 years for a 7-week time period coinciding with the Thanksgiving bye week. So if we were to do that, draw this line chart, something interesting appears. So what I see in this chart are about 5 definite spikes, and then about 5 definite valleys in cost. So we're talking about a 10-year time frame, but only about 5 spikes. That tells me that 1 year costs are high, and the next year costs are low in an alternating fashion like that. The other thing that I noticed in this chart is if you look at each peak, each one is higher than the last. And if you look at each valley, again, each one is higher than the last. So if we were to draw a line through this chart to represent the trend of this chart, we could get an understanding of the long-term direction of the cost changes. And so there we go. And then the slope of that chart will tell, or that line will tell us what the inflation is. And in this case, we have about a 5% average annual inflation in the Brussels sprout market. Now that probably makes sense with it being the most improved vegetable in the produce department. Obviously demand is spiking quite a bit, driving some incremental costing in this program. But now here's the fun part. We can actually take this information, the average annual inflation, overlay it across the seasonal variability, and we can actually predict the cost for 2019 Thanksgiving. I just want to throw in a bit of a word of caution. Predicting costs in this manner captures long-term trends, but very short-term trends, whether they be crop failures or spikes in demand or something that cannot be anticipated through a long-term trend, will not be captured with this analysis. So it's important that you take these predictions with a bit of grain of salt, because there are things that can knock the predictions out of whack and make something unexpected happen. And you can certainly ask people who tried to predict celery costs this year what these sudden changes in demand or supply can do to those costs. But nevertheless, we're going to take a look at, for the first time, our prediction on Brussels sprout costs for the Thanksgiving time period. So we see here, over the 7-week time period, costs ranging from just below $29 to just above $36. And so you can see that it is on the higher end from where we saw on the line chart, which is understandable because we saw significant deflation. So this year, we would anticipate to see significant inflation. And if we take a look at just the important week surrounding Thanksgiving, we can hone in on where we want to be this year. So we take a look at week 45, the Thanksgiving bye week, and we get a predicted cost of $29.29 FOB. Now you can use that information to start to plan your programs, your retail pricing, and perhaps your promotional programs for the Thanksgiving bye week. Now here's another infographic that we're going to see throughout the balance of this webinar. This is an alert. This will tell us about important operational or merchandising aspects to remember regarding the Thanksgiving time period. And this first alert, we're going to look at strawberries. And the important thing about strawberries is that over this time period, their volumes rapidly decline. If you take a look at this line chart, you'll see that in week 39, typical volumes for strawberries are around 1,100 truckloads. That's a lot of strawberries. But over the course of the next several weeks, that number declines quite rapidly. And if you take a look at where we are looking at 45, we see that that number is slightly below 600. So roughly half of where it was just 7 weeks earlier. And if we keep going down this line, we'll see that it continues to decline as we exit the Thanksgiving time period to a number that is quite smaller than where we started. And when you're chasing demand like this, when you're chasing declining demand, shrink can really become a problem. So let's take a closer look at that and try and think of ways where we can manage shrink on the strawberry category. The first thing we should do is we should know our volumes. And that means keeping records from years past on the amount of product that you brought in to satisfy these declining demand periods. But it also means keeping very good notes on what happened during those weeks. Let me give you an example. If you were to bring in, say, 50 cases of strawberries to satisfy your Thanksgiving period, and you notice that in the first day or so, you're not selling those strawberries like you had anticipated, and those strawberries are getting lower and lower and lower quality as you go along, you may have found that you have to drop your price to, say, something like 99 cents just to blow out of your poor quality strawberries. Now, if you didn't know that that's what happened to you last year, and all you see is that you brought in 50 cases, you might duplicate that bad decision and bring in 50 cases again. But if you had records that said, I have to drop my price to 99 cents and blow them out, then you would know maybe 50 cases was too much. Maybe I'll bring in something a little bit less. And so what I've seen over the past are produce managers who take their order guides from the year before and make notes on them. They show what they ordered and then make notes on how that product sold throughout the season or throughout the week. Another option is just to have it on a notebook for the important time frames and what you brought in and what happened during those weeks. The other thing is, in the heat of the summer, customers are looking for lots of strawberries. They might be looking for them in 2-pound packages, maybe 4-pound packages, maybe even full flats of strawberries. But in these later weeks throughout the year, price might be a bit of an issue, and customers are still looking for strawberries, but they're probably looking for them in smaller packages. So it probably makes sense to bring strawberries in a smaller package. If you were carrying 2-pound strawberries in the summer, maybe it's a good time to bring in just 1-pound strawberries for the fall. You know, we talked about the dangers of having to drop your price to 99 cents and you end up selling low quality strawberries at a very low price. Well, the way around that is to commit to a markdown strategy. The one adage in produce that will always stick with me is your first loss is your best loss. And that means that as soon as you see that you run into a problem, address that problem. And usually that problem is addressed through a markdown. And the other thing that I'll tell you in my experience is short-term demand trends very rarely change. Although you'll be sitting there and watching your sales, and you think, you know, on day 1, day 2, sales are very poor. Well, hopefully they're going to pick up day 3, day 4, day 5. Well, that rarely ever happens. The only thing you can do to impact that demand is to take a lower price or to move it to a higher traffic area. But if you're talking about strawberries that are usually in large supply, your best strategy is to take a markdown as soon as you notice that you're running into problems. And then lastly, have somebody maintain that display. That doesn't mean that's going to be the only thing that they do all week, but it will be one of the things that they do. And that way you can be comfortable in knowing that somebody is going to be looking after that strawberry display all the time. Now that might mean that they're culling some of the leaky berries off the shelf, or they might be replenishing the product as it sells down. But it's important to just not let it go without anybody watching it. So have somebody whose primary responsibility is to maintain that display. The next product we're going to look at is cranberries. As we set up this infographic, we think about the demand of cranberries and how that's expanding beyond just the key holiday timeframes. But is it still important for these key holiday timeframes? Let's take a look, see how high the mercury goes on our thermometer. You see it goes all the way up. Actually, it busts right through the thermometer. So it's higher than what our measuring gauge can measure. In fact, it's 19.6% of all cranberries are shipped during the Thanksgiving bye week. And that represents 117 truckloads, pretty significant amount of trucks for a specialty item like cranberries. And if we take a look at our inflation-deflation ticker, we see that last year costs were down slightly, but retail price was down a little bit more. So that means, contrary to what we saw with the whole Thanksgiving program, profitability was a little bit lower on cranberries than it was in 2017. Perhaps collectively, retailers were looking at a specialty item like cranberries as a loss leader, something to drag customers into their stores. So if we take a look at our cost history over the last 10 years, we draw a line graph and we see some ups and downs. And one thing that I notice in this chart is that it appears as if over time, costs are declining. And so if we draw our trend line through this chart, we do see in fact that costs are declining. We have about 1.2% average annual deflation. And the important thing about deflation is typically in our economy, we have a small amount of inflation, about 1 or 2% annually. So a product that is deflating in cost is actually a little bit more impactful because the rest of the economy is inflating. So that's something to keep in mind. And if we take a look at this deflation, added over top the seasonal variability, once again, we can take a look at our predicted costs for 2019. And we see here a fairly stable cost line that ranges roughly between $27 and $28. And if we take a look at the weeks surrounding the Thanksgiving buy, we see that week 45, we're at $26.76. Again, this is something that you can use as a gauge as you start to plan your retail pricing or your promotional plan for the Thanksgiving time period. Now, our next alert, we're going to take a look at the organic category and how cranberries can showcase your organic assortment. But a little tip here, buy early. And I'll tell you why. If we were to draw a line graph on the average cost per week of conventional cranberries, you'll get something that looks like this. A very straight line that hugs that $30 mark. That line is so straight you can practically sleep on it. But if we were to overlay the organic cost, something interesting happens. You see it starts very close to conventional and then gradually goes up to the point where it's almost double the cost come week 49. We clearly see an expanding period of demand exceeds supply. So we want to make sure we get in there and buy early enough so we can take advantage of that low cost premium. But what else do we do to ensure we are expanding on our organic cranberry program? Well, for one, if you want to showcase this item as a part of your organic assortment, you have to make sure your stores are carrying organic cranberries. Obviously, if you want to sell organic cranberries to your customers, they have to be in the store. And just like what we said on the last page, make sure you buy early. When it comes to pricing your organic cranberries, it's important to set a price that reflects that cost premium. On the one hand, you don't want to price your organic cranberries over the market and scare away potential customers. But you also don't want to price it too low so that as you're enticing your customers to upgrade to a more premium product, you're putting less profit into the bank. So make sure that your pricing reflects that cost premium. Also, if you're going to advertise cranberries, why not throw in your organic cranberries into the ad? That could be a picture, it could even be a line mention that says, hey, we're in the cranberry game, we're in the organic cranberry game, come to our store and you can get them. And lastly, oftentimes cranberries are put into a high traffic area. It's a good idea to put your organic cranberries in a high traffic area as well. Maybe an end cap or an off-shelf display or something like that. So the next item we're going to look at is pears. Pears is one of those categories where there's so many varieties, there's got to be something there that suits everybody's taste. And it's also one of those products that is available year-round. So it'll be interesting to see how important pears are for Thanksgiving. So we take a look at our mercury gauge on our thermometer. We see it goes up to 3.5%. That's a pretty big number for a staple category like pears that's available year-round. And we've been seeing numbers of truckloads in 100, 120, things like that. Well, this one, 791 trucks. So a lot of volume needed to satisfy the demand for pears. And if we look at last year, we see some cost deflation, almost 10%, and some retail price deflation of about 1.4%. Similar to what we saw with the Brussels sprouts, where there's a decline in cost, retailers were giving a little bit of a benefit back to their customer, while at the same time adding a little bit more profitability. Now, if we take a look at the costing over the last 10 years for Bartlett pears, we see what appears to be a continuously increasing cost. So there's seasonal variability for sure, but the trend appears to be upwards in cost. And if we draw our trend line, we certainly see that it is upwards, and we have annual inflation of about 4.5%. Now we can use that again to predict our 2019 costs. And we end up with a line that starts a little bit lower and continuously rises throughout the time period. When we take a look at the week surrounding the Thanksgiving buy, we get a cost of $26.66 FOB for Bartlett pears. Now we've been talking about some of these key seasonal Thanksgiving items, but one thing that we can't lose sight of is the importance of different multicultural items when it comes to seasonal success. And the one we're going to talk about is ginger. Ginger is interesting because we do see sales increasing, but we also see the customer base increasing. If we were to take a look at the import value in US dollars of ginger over the last 7 years, we'll see something interesting. This will be on the left-hand axis. We're going to take a look at the US import value of ginger. And we see that there's a big spike in 2014, but other than that, we see increases throughout this time period. So there's a definite increase in the import value of ginger. Now, if we were to look at the equivalent on the Canadian side on the right-hand axis, we'll see a line that pretty much hugs the US line. So similar to the US, there is more ginger being imported year after year, with a big spike there in 2014. So the big question is, how can we capitalize on this increased demand in ginger? Well, for one, just like we heard with organic cranberries, if we want to sell more ginger, we have to make sure we're carrying ginger. And the other thing, ginger is an interesting product because it appeals to two different types of customers. There is the traditional ginger customer who is used to using it in a variety of their traditional dishes, who might be interested in buying ginger in conjunction with the rest of their Asian vegetables. So it might be a good idea to display ginger with things like bok choy and napa and products like that. But there's also a growing group of non-traditional customers who are buying more and more ginger. And they're interested in using ginger to flavor their dishes. And they might be looking for it in conjunction with other types of products that they use to flavor dishes, things like garlic or onions or things like that. So it's a good idea to duplicate your displays of ginger to capture both of those customers. The other thing, if you have an advanced sampling program, ginger is a great product to use in your samples. It's good for cooking if you're doing some low-end cooking in your samples, or if you're making salad dressings. It'll really amaze your customers at the flavors that you can enhance dishes with by using ginger. And don't be afraid to communicate to your customers about all the different attributes of ginger using your signage. You can let them know what dishes to use them in, what to use them in conjunction with, and perhaps even a little bit of the background of ginger. And then lastly, there are times in the year where ginger has a bit of a heightened importance. These are things like the Chinese New Year, the Mid-Autumn Festival, or Dragon Boat Race festivals. These are times where a lot of entertaining and a lot of celebrating around Asian cuisine could be happening. So it would be a good idea to build up bigger displays and put them in high traffic areas to let your customers know that you understand the value of ginger and that you're in that game. Now, another big item in the Thanksgiving time period are pomegranates. I can remember a time back when I was in the retail world where a big pomegranate supplier approached us and asked us to build the biggest pomegranate display in the country. And so us being an organization not shy to take people up on those types of challenges, we did. And so we built a display so big in one of our stores. Get this, we actually built a house out of pomegranates inside one of our stores. This house was so big that we could put a card table and chairs right in the display. So of course we had our cup of coffee and played a game of cards right in our pomegranate display. Well, certainly we won the prize for the largest display, and as you can well imagine, we sold a lot of pomegranates that year. And that was right around Thanksgiving time. So I wonder how important pomegranates are for Thanksgiving. So if we take a look at our thermometer, we see that it actually busts through the thermometer again. This is bigger than what our thermometer can measure. It's actually 12.2% of all pomegranates are shipped during the Thanksgiving week. It's a lot of pomegranates. And again, 119 truckloads. This is, of course, a specialty type product, so not as much as what we saw with pears, but still a lot of trucks to satisfy that demand. And what we saw last year with costs was a fairly big drop in FOB cost, but then a fairly large increase in retail price. Now, that's obviously very interesting. I would say take that with a bit of a grain of salt, because it probably means that there are more larger pomegranates sold in the marketplace due to the reduced cost than the year before. But we're going to take a look at costs over the last 10 years, specifically on larger pomegranates, 30s and larger. And what we see over the last 10 years is what looks to be a definite upward trend on cost. If we take a look at our trend line, we do see that costs were increasing about 2% annually, which really isn't that big of an amount. It pretty closely approximates the inflation across the entire economy. So not a significant amount of inflation. But now we take a look at what this means for 2019, and we see, again, a fairly stable time period, costs ranging between 26 and 28, slightly going down as we progress through the season. And taking a look at the Thanksgiving bye week, we see it cuts it right in the middle with an FOB cost of $27 for 30s and higher. We talked about some multicultural items, but the other thing we can't lose sight of are some of these multicultural events that support these items. And one that is coming up during this time frame is Diwali, which is October 27th to 31st. But Diwali is big with the South Asian population. And one of the reasons it's so important to us is because of the population in our countries of people who celebrate Diwali. If we look in the United States, we see that the South Asian population is 5.4 million people. And if we look in Canada, we see the population is 2 million people. Now, one thing to take note of, the relationship between Canada and the United States, for the most part, you can look at Canada being about 1/10 the size of the United States. That's true in regards to population. It's basically true in regards to gross domestic product. So generally anything that is comparable, you can look at on a 10-to-1 ratio. But if you look at the South Asian population, you'll see that that's not a 10-to-1 ratio. You'll see that it appears as if the South Asian population is more important to the Canadian population as a whole. That said, there are a lot of South Asian population in both countries, so it's important to focus on this type of celebration across our retail programs. And so how can we do that? Well, we can focus on the products that are important in South Asian cooking that will most certainly be sold during the Diwali. One big item in South Asian cooking is garlic. So ensuring that you have enough garlic on hand to satisfy that demand is important. The other thing is mint. Now, traditionally, we're used to carrying mint in 20 or 40 gram clamshell packages. Well, that's not going to cut it for a Diwali celebration. So this is an excellent time to introduce a bunch mint into your stores, something that provides a little bit more volume for this style of cooking. Now, other products include long eggplant and, of course, okra. Now, if we focus on these 4 items, but also make it known to our customers that we're focusing on these items specifically for a Diwali celebration, then we can let our customers know that we understand this celebration and that we're in that game. The next item we'll talk about are sweet potatoes. This is another one of those items that is generating more and more importance outside of the traditional Thanksgiving celebrations. And if we're to take a look at where we stand today, we would see it go all the way up to 3.4%. Well, that's a fairly large number, but if we were to take a look at this in 2009, that number would bust through the thermometer again and be at 7.2%. Now, I don't know about you, but I think about myself, and we eat a lot more sweet potatoes at home as well. You know, we're practically trading off regular potatoes with sweet potatoes almost on a weekly basis. So we certainly see that sweet potatoes are becoming more important across just Thanksgiving, but it is still a very important Thanksgiving product. If we see the number of truckloads, we've got 808 truckloads across the country. And also taking a look at our inflation ticker, we see about 4% cost inflation with about 6% retail price deflation. So that's interesting. That goes a little bit against the grain from what we've been seeing from some of the other products. Perhaps like cranberries, this is one of those items that retailers are thinking is important for Thanksgiving. We want to use this as a loss leader in order to drive customers into our store. So if we take a look at costs over the last 10 years, we see something interesting. We see 2 definite levels, almost like the first 5 years was on one price shelf and the last 5 years is on a second price shelf. And if we look at our trends over the 10 years, we see that there is about 2.6 average annual inflation, not an enormous amount of inflation, but still growing over time. And we use that information to generate our predictions for 2019. And again, we see an extremely stable cost line. Almost every single price there starts with 14. And if we were to take a look at the weeks surrounding the bye week, we get a $14.58 prediction for week 45. So not bad to plan your programs on that price. So we've talked again a lot about these seasonal important items, but we can't lose sight of the staples in our stores. Some of these items generate much more volume than some of the products we're talking about. And if we're focusing on the seasonal items, we might lose sight of these extremely important products. Products like oranges, we'll see 2,000 truckloads almost. Grapes, just over 2,000 truckloads. Onions, approaching 3,000 truckloads. Apples, 3,500 truckloads. And then potatoes, over 5,000 truckloads during the Thanksgiving bye week. That's an awful lot of volume. And if we're focusing only on the seasonal specialty items and losing sight of these items, we could really be doing ourselves a disservice. So let's take a look at one in particular. Let's take a look at potatoes and think about some of the things that we can do to ensure that potatoes stay top of mind during the Thanksgiving buy. Well, for one, we can increase our assortment. During the summertime months, it's possible that we decreased our assortment in order to make room for other products. So we may have gotten rid of things like 10-pound bag potatoes or some of our varieties like fingerlings or some of the other flavors. Now's a good time to bring them back into our store. Now that customers are changing their meal habits, it's a good time to increase that assortment again. And if you have room in your store, a great way to get a lot of product very quickly on the floor and generate a lot of sales without impacting your labor line is to use pallet drops. You can really generate a lot of sales without generating a lot of labor just by dropping pallets if you've got the room in your store. Another thing you can do is remind your customers of these changing dinner routines. They are going to be eating a little bit differently, and so you can prompt them with the way you advertise, the way you sign your store, and also with the way you sample product. A good way to let your customers know that it's time to get potatoes back center of the plate is to show them the different varieties that you have through your sampling program. Now, the last product we're going to talk about is celery. Celery is certainly an item that is in most people's fridges 52 weeks out of the year. So it's hard to imagine that any one week is going to drive more importance than other weeks. But let's just see how important celery is during the Thanksgiving bye week. Our mercury goes up on our thermometer to 3.4%. So remember, this product is in everybody's fridges 52 weeks out of the year. But during Thanksgiving, you see 3.4% of all celery shipments occurring on that week. So that's pretty significant. And we see 1,339 truckloads to satisfy that demand. That's getting pretty close to some of those products we saw on the last page. So it's pretty much a staple product that generates more interest over Thanksgiving. Now, if we look at our inflation ticker, we see that costs are nearly flat. Now, if we were to take a look at this for the Christmas program, we would probably see something a little bit different, because that was the start of the demand frenzy and the juicing routine for celery. But when it came to the Thanksgiving time period, it was pretty flat. And we did see some a pretty brisk retail price deflation. So if we took a look at the costs over the last 10 years, we see fairly stable, but interestingly, two big spikes, one about 4 years ago, and then one towards the end of this time frame as we exited Thanksgiving. That was really the start of that frenzy in 2018. And if we draw our trend line through this, we see that there is a significant amount of inflation, possibly driven by those two big spikes, but at over 6%. And then we use that to predict our cost for 2019, and we see a cost line that is moving up as we exit the Thanksgiving time period. So possibly a little bit of what happened last year is getting mixed into that. And if we look at where we're going to be for the important bye weeks, we see 1882 as our prediction for 24 or 30 pound celery for the Thanksgiving bye. Now, the last alert we're going to take a look at organics again. This time, we're going to look at grape tomatoes, a real organic hero. And the reason I call this an organic hero, because the cost premiums are typically not that high with grape tomatoes. So if we were to draw the conventional cost curve over the last 3 years, we would get something that looks like this. Now, if we overlay the organic cost curve, we see something that really hugs that conventional cost. And you actually see in a couple of occasions, the costing on organics being lower than the costing on conventional. Now, if we were to remove the line and just look at the cost trends, you see something interesting. First, we'll remove the conventional line and draw its trend, and now the organic trend. A couple of things emerge out of this. Number one, the premiums across this entire time is fairly low. Even at the beginning, we see a premium of about $4.60 per case of 12 pints. That's less than 50 cents a pint. But as we go further on in this time frame, we see that premium shrinking. And it's actually at about $1.35 towards the end. So about 10 to 15 cents per pint. So when you think about it, there's a lot that you can do with your retail pricing when your gap is that low. Let's take a little closer look on how we can grow our organic category using grape tomatoes. Well, just like we heard with some of the other products, we need to make sure we're carrying the grape tomatoes. Obviously, that's the way to get it in your product's hands, making sure all of our stores have that available. We also heard about pricing with some of the other categories. So certainly set a price that reflects your cost premium. Don't cost it out of the market and scare your customers away, but don't price it so that you're putting less money in the bank as you trade your customers up to a premium category. Again, advertise it when you're advertising your conventional. And again, put it in a place that your customers can see it so that they know you're in this game and that you're pushing organic. But here's something different for grape tomatoes, something we didn't talk about with cranberries. If you're going to have cost parity with conventional grape tomatoes, why not eliminate conventional and just let the organic category run the tables with grape tomatoes? It might be a little bit out of the box, but it'll tell your customers that you're in this game, but it will also eliminate the need to have two different price points on a similar item. So that's the last thing we have for Thanksgiving. We've got a lot to think about. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and of course, good luck with all your produce sales.
Hi guys, I just wanted to make sure that we have all of the questions that there we go. We have, well, of course, will this seminar be available for people to watch again who registered? And yes, it will. We'll be sending out to all the registrants the link through to this and to Mike's, or I'm sorry, his first webinar from a few months back, and all of his webinars live on PMG, and we can get those links out to everybody that he does for the Packer and Produce Market Guide. You know, I was kind of intrigued to understand, I mean, there is truly, like, there's zero break, if I understand this, in planning from basically mid-September on season. Would you say that's true?
Sorry, there's no break?
It just doesn't seem like for retailers to really be effective in their planning, in their planograms and in their product flow and everything else, that there's really any break from September on. Or would you say that this season starts even before this?
Well, you know, I think the whole grocery industry, but produce in particular, is really turning into a 52-week-a-year endeavor. I mean, you go from your seasonal flips to different events, and the more successful retailers are learning how to event better. And so they're combining the traditional holiday events, plus the traditional seasonal events, and then combining that with a whole slew of multicultural events. So when you add all those into the regular seasonal flips, which are really big deals in the produce business, it's go, go, go all the time.
And are you seeing anybody struggling with any, and I know that this is kind of putting you on the spot, but are you seeing this struggle, any of your contacts or the people and retailers that you work with struggling with any of the trade initiatives or like the suspension agreements or any of those kind of things through the holiday season?
Well, I haven't seen a whole lot out of the suspension agreement, but certainly pricing has been up on some of the commodities with respect to, you know, some of the weather that's going on in some of the growing areas, and there has been some trade disruptions across a variety of different commodities. So that's trickling down to the entire program, including into the produce business. Nothing that has really disrupted the flow of goods, but a little bit of differences with pricing.
Got it. Do you see a lot of change coming in into, you know, you talk about the number of truckloads and that sort of thing. Just an odd question and out of kind of left field here, but I think it's a great question. Do you see any change in truckloads and logistics with more and more like cloud logistics options or more and more blockchain being implemented that covers logistics as well? Do you see things are getting more succinct, or are we just shipping more and selling more, which is great news for our industry? But
yeah, well, I think we're certainly shipping more and selling more. You know, there's a lot of change in the industry, and you know, a lot of change within the logistics part of the industry. And so you're seeing a lot of different modes of transportation being used. And, you know, with a lot of the technological advances, there's a lot of ability to better track that those shipments, you know, using, you know, whether it's through truck or train or intermodal or shipment or whatever. But certainly there's a better capability to you know, track those shipments, and a lot of different options on how to get it to where you need it to go.
very cool. Another one-off odd question. Do you think at any point that part of your produce almanac will be reporting on hemp or cannabis or CBD?
Well, it's actually an area of the industry that I'm not involved in. So I would say in the near future, probably not, but you never know if there ends up being a little bit more of an integration between the produce business and the hemp business or some of the other legals, then yeah, maybe.
Very cool. And then will you be attending PMA? I just want to let participants and attendees know if you'll be there for consulting or anything like that.
Absolutely, I will be at the PMA. I'll also be at GoPex in January. So lots of opportunity to connect with people.
Well, and we're excited about GoPex this year and excited to have you at GoPex this year. If you guys aren't familiar, it's the Global Organic Produce Expo. It's in Miami at the Fontainebleau, January 9th through the 11th. And it's kind of a really innovative show and stacked with some really great information. More of what you've seen here, a deep dive on organics, a deep dive on consumer attitudes towards packaging. You know, we will be announcing the keynote speaker of GoPex here in the next few weeks. We're very excited to roll that out. He's quite Canadian, very much like you in that. So you'll have a fellow countryman there with you.
Excellent.
So we're excited about
we'll have a beer.
Yes, and we're excited to have you, and we're excited to see you at PMA. You know, you can stop by and we'll be able to reach out to Mike if he's not at our booth at the Packer and Produce Market Guide booth at 3931 at in Anaheim, and we can definitely reach out and get him over there for you if you guys need to get in touch with him. And other than that, I just want to thank you for your time today, Mike, and I want to thank everybody who took time out of their day to to join us for this webinar and to go through this learning process with us. I think it just makes us all sharper on our game, and we're excited to have you.
Great, thank you very much. And I also wish to thank everybody who took the time out to take the webinar.
Excellent. And then we have another webinar slated specifically for Christmas in a few weeks. Hope to see you guys there. That also will live on the site and be available on the site, but you only get the link to get into that part if you have signed up for the webinar. So even if you can't attend live, please do be sure to sign up. We appreciate all of you. Signing off, this is Jessie Gunn, and thank you, Mike Mowdy from Execulytics.
Thank you very much.